shaky for some reason. Sound check, sound check.
Hello.
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 All right, sound's working.
All right, that's good.
For some reason, it's jumpy. I don't know why it does this.
Is it on your end or is it on mine?
I don't know, but we were fine before we went live, so probably my end, but it'll be fine. Looks like it's doing okay now. All right. So nobody's joined us yet, but what we will be doing, we'll introduce LLV, we'll cover, how you got into hobby and how specifically you got into doing this. And then, first I'll do all the podcast stuff, like thank the supporters and all that sort of business. And then we can dive right into it.
Oh, we good mentioning, I'll call them plugs. I mean, they're not plugs, but I'm allowed to mention things like tabletop TO and Best Coast pairings and things like that.
Yeah, man, whatever. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's just where I get some of your data from. So.
Yeah, we have no, associations that would be upset or anything.
Yeah, just thought I'd check. Cheers.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to CanHammer Podcast. This is episode 147, almost 150. Which is pretty crazy. What should we do for 150 anniversary?
24-hour show.
That would
All
be
the cool
fun,
kids are doing it.
but difficult. Maybe we should give something away.
All right, I guess that's okay.
Maybe we'll give away like an army or something. What?
Daughters of Cain. I hear they're pretty good.
Yeah, so welcome to CanHammer Podcast. I'm your host, Darren. Chris is not here tonight. I'm joined by two special guests to my left and right. I'm in the middle. Got to keep them apart. We got, first is we. And
We from Huycon Wargaming.
All right, Huycon Wargaming.
Toronto, Ontario.
Check it
That's
out.
right.
You can find it on YouTube, Facebook, anywhere else. Where else are you at me?
I don't know. I think I have an Instagram.
You think
Yes.
I have the Instagram? Okay, that
Yeah.
usually means that you don't use it.
There's an account with the name.
All right, we use a regular presence on our Sigmar casts anyway.
The best cast.
So apparently Tristan Gray's joined us, and he says the dude on the left is a jerk.
Which one's the
My
left? Me?
left or the other left? Oh, that's kind of.
Oh, it's ambiguous. It's ambiguous. It's definitely not you, Darren.
And we're also joined by another special guest, Damian, a.k.a. you might know him as LLV.
Yes,
Welcome.
hello.
Welcome. And Damian doesn't sound Canadian, but he is in Canada, so we're allowed to have him on the Canadian podcast.
Honorary Canadian.
Honorary Canadian.
Hey.
By the way of England.
All right. So we will be talking tonight about Age of Sigmar statistics. Of course, LLV is the collector of such statistics, and we'll be trying to focus more on North American statistics versus some of the other podcasts which focus more on European and UK meta. So we'll see how that goes. So before we start, everybody knows that's fine. What we'll do is, so Damian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I want to know what the name LLV means or stands for, and then tell us how you got into all this mathematics and Excel spreadsheets.
Oh God. I can't really say what LLV stands for. It's an old childhood nickname.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just leave it at that. going back some years there. How I got into maths and statistics. I do it at work. I do a lot of spreadsheets and number crunching at work, so it's just something I do daily, and I figured I might as well do my hobby put that into what I do at work. So
what's your history of with Sigmar?
So I started Sigmar only back in March. I used to play Warhammer Fantasy Battles and 40k for many years. Started playing when I was about 13 years old, which is going back some years. My first codex was the original Fruity Rainbow Eldar Codex, if people remember that one.
Mm-hmm.
My first model was a metal Avatar of Cain, which cost me £10 at the time. So those that are as old as me will kind of be able to figure my age out from there, I guess. And I got into 40k first, played like you do, just with your friends on the floor. Then moved into Warhammer Fantasy. I've been primarily a painter for all these years, and so people are always calling me. I get called many names since doing the stats from people I don't know. But what's funny is I've always been primarily on the hobby side. I've been more hobby focused regarding painting and modeling and all that fun stuff. So I got out of Fantasy Battle. I had a bad accident, broke my hand, couldn't paint anymore. Got out of Fantasy Battle, started playing those other games like Magic the Gathering, and that's, I think, where I got the love of the stats in regards to a game. Not so much always just to go, okay, I want the most powerful army or the most powerful build, but I just wanted to see what everyone else was playing, and I really wanted to see if I could find that deck, or in Sigmar, find that army that could fill that niche that not everyone else was playing. I didn't want to just be a bandwagoner. So because those numbers weren't out there, I started doing it myself, and it evolved into what we have today.
Cool. Well, at around the same time that you started doing it, this guy named Peter, who's also Canadian, started doing it for 40k, which is interesting coincidence. And so the Canadians were slowly taking over this kind of statistics side of both games, so that was a pretty interesting coincidence. Cool.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, I just want to thank our sponsors. So our big sponsors, of course, Dan at Sequence Comics. We've got Dave at Tista Minis, Hoyt up in Thunder Games and Gifts, and Martin over at Dice and Deck. So thank you to our big sponsors. I want to thank all of our patrons. Thank you very much for supporting us. And hi to Sir Flukes a lot in the chat, or Flukesy, I believe he's known as, over in the UK. But he's joined us, which means it's probably about 2 a.m. there, which is pretty impressive. It's like that time I interviewed Rob and it was like 4 a.m. That was pretty crazy. So, what you guys been up to? Any crazy Sigmar hobbying? Are you painting a lot right now? Do you do commissions, or you just paint your own stuff, or what do you do?
Is that to we or
that's
myself?
You, Damian.
Oh, me. So right now, I signed up for a little event called Bobo. That's the Bravery One British Open 2019. It's coming May 18th and 19th. I got the idea from that after seeing the Honest Wargamer coverage. Just had to be a part of that event, and I think it's going to be, they've sold just under 200 tickets right now.
Wow.
So it's shaping up to be the biggest event in Europe. The Aussies are still beating them at 222 tickets.
Wow.
So we'll see how that works out, but I'll be going to that. And I did start a Death Army. I play Legions of Nagash. Not a power army. I started back in February and March, just to put that out there. And I didn't want to travel with it. It's super fragile, so I started picking up some Stormcast. On my desk right now is a bunch of Castigators. Castigate what?
Castrators.
Castrators. Yeah. Often considered an underpowered unit. I think there's a little niche for them, so we'll see what happens. We'll see if the Matrix is telling me the right answers there.
Awesome.
Well, if you take them in that battalion, it gives them a little bonus though, right? with the ballista, I think, and right, I think.
Yeah, we don't talk about the Soul Strike Battalion though. That's the secret.
The Constipators.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, if you could write a comedy version of the Stormcast book, it's pretty funny. And I believe, Damian, that you're going over to represent CanHammer, because early Secret Santa sent you a CanHammer jersey to represent.
Yeah, I don't. I should have it to hand. That's bad of me. Yes, there's pictures of me in it. I have a beautiful CanHammer jersey. I will be wearing it day one. Has my nickname LLV on the back, so people will be able to spot me and come and throw pies at me for collecting stats and telling them
how bad their
armies are good or bad. Yeah, and I'll be rocking that on day one. So super excited. Playing my weak Stormcast build with Castigators wearing the CanHammer jersey, so hoping for a solid 3-2.
Awesome. So, what you been up to?
Oh, I've last time I was on the show, I was saying that I was building up a Slanesh army, so I've been furiously building and painting Hellstriders, but today was day one of, let's say, my hobby enjoyment of these exalted chariots of Slanesh. So I'm having a lot of fun hobbying the heck out of all these blades on these chariots, of which there are like 10 million of these blades. So that Slanesh army is starting to shape up, but it's going to be quite a while before I get these chariots all ready to roll.
So, but do you think there's going to be a book soon?
I don't know. I mean, what is soon? What would you say soon?
Well,
6 months?
It's got to be after the Bad Moon, the garage thing, because that's next probably.
Yeah.
So
yeah. You got G-Cell called too, right? Like down the pipe.
Yeah,
that's coming too.
Different game.
Yeah, well, they don't like to. They like to give one army a spotlight, right? So maybe in 4 months there might be a Slanesh book in 4 months, but I think the 40K is probably going to get a little bit more juice. 2018 was the year Age of Sigmar, you know what I'm saying? So they might pump their brakes a little bit. We'll see. But yeah, these exalted chariots, they're a lot of fun to build.
Tristan is asking you how much blood you lost building that model.
Oh, it's a fingerful of blood is fine. acceptable losses, as there were.
You know where I lost blood? You know, building that purple moon of Shaiish. Man, that thing's spiky.
Oh,
I think it actually jabbed me at one point.
These fit these really they are a little bit too tightly fit. You know what I'm saying? Like they're nice because they snap together. Well, but they're just a little too tight. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Some of the Night Vault things are like that. The Stormcast Night Vault ones are like a little bit too tight.
Yeah. Soul Wars is the same thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you need to clip those pegs off, I've found. Otherwise, you don't get a solid join. You get big gaps.
And it's right where like the symbol is, so then you get this like line going right up the shoulder pad, and it's like, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Apparently, Fluxy had a friend who drew blood, hitting his hand off of the Corn Dragon. You know, the big Forge World Corn Dragon. I'm surprised I don't own that model. I'm very surprised at myself.
I'm surprised at you too, man. I'm disappointed, if anything.
You know why?
You're buying that Forge World table, though.
It freaking costs crazy amounts now to ship it from the States. It was way cheaper to get it from the UK. Surprisingly enough. Anyway.
Well, you might know someone that's going to the UK, you know, so...
oh, yeah?
Might have to...
oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's where my Telemon came from. Nick Ligari went to Warhammer World. I'm like, yo, dude, pick me up a Telemon when you're there. So he picked me up a Telemon. And then he was like, so when do you want it? I'm like, well, why don't you keep and paint it, too? So he did. It's great. All right. So let's move on. So what we're going to do is... Damian's going to take us through some of the statistics that he's gathered, both kind of a general idea, because he has statistics from as many places you could gather around the world, and then we'll try and hone a little bit onto North America. There's not a lot of Canadian just by itself, so North American. And then what I'm going to do is throw the stats up on the stream. It's going to cover all our faces, and hopefully people will be able to read it from there. Otherwise, where can we find these statistics? They're all pretty public domain, aren't they?
Yeah, right now, big shout out to The Honest Wargamer. Fantastic podcast, fantastic Twitch, fantastic YouTube. I think they're on pretty much every platform you could imagine right now. If specifically looking at Age of Sigmar, every Monday, starting at 7 p.m. GMT. And they've just come out with a website in November. Does some pretty cool stuff regarding faction breakdowns and army breakdowns. So you can go on there and type your army list in and do a full breakdown or read over people's. And we have a whole section right now hosting the stats. So everything we're looking at can be found on thehonestwargamer.com.
Yep. Do check that website out. It's amazing. Rob has put a lot of work into it. A bunch of us sort of put in a bunch of list reviews and stuff just to get the website kind of loaded up before it went live. And my list review is obviously the best one on the site, but you know.
Oh, so is everyone's.
No, but all the kind of, you know, big players, mostly British players, but all the big players writing really nice, detailed list rundowns. Like, not just the list, but like what the units do, what you should take, why, how you play it, what missions it's good at. Like, it's really comprehensive. And there's unit rundowns. And so it's all on there. HonestWargamer.com. It's a really good website. Obviously, I'm a big patron of Rob's, and his podcast is really fun too.
Do you have a list on there, LLV? Or Damian, do you have a list on there?
I don't. I have one partially written for the Stormcast army. I guess you can do this now. Ooh, look at Castigator.
Hey.
So I have one partially written, but I was waiting for the FAQ to come out, which hasn't changed a thing. So it should be up pretty soon, hopefully.
Yeah, I didn't even feel like doing like a show on the FAQ. There really wasn't that much to talk about. So, yeah. It took me like a few minutes to read through all the different FAQs and discover there wasn't much to talk about. So, getting your cloak.
Yeah, there's been a lot of fallout from that, if we just want to mention quickly. And in regards to stats and people taking the stats and saying, well, look at this, why isn't it being fixed? But you have to I'll always defend the stats. These aren't my stats. They get referred to as LLV stats. These are just the stats that the information I've been given or gathered so far. So you have to take it in context with everything. But yeah, you can look and say, oh, look, this is doing well or this is doing badly. But without context, you need to take that. So regarding the FAQ and the stats, they're both relevant, I think, but don't ever look at a stat and point your finger out and say this is an issue or this isn't an issue. Always take some context there. So.
Yeah, I think it's important before anybody starts talking about stats in 40K or Sigmar to realize that statistics are based on numbers. The more numbers you have, the more accurate the statistics. And although we like to think we have a lot of numbers, we really don't in the grand scheme of mathematical numbering. And, and we haven't done statistical analysis on whether a 52% win rate is significantly different from a 50% win rate or a 48% win rate or even like a 40% win rate, given the numbers that may not be. But that's kind of not the point. The point is that it's a very interesting view of what's happening in the game. There's certainly trends that you can comment on, even if the trends are not, rigorously statistically tested. It's still trends. Trends are trends, and it's just interesting data to talk about. And why not? Because the FAQ wasn't much to talk about, so we might as well talk about statistics. So where do you want to start, Damian? I'll let you take us off.
Yeah, so I think you have some images there. I think the best thing to probably start with would just be the events that we've looked at so far. If you want to bring that one up there, Darren.
That's the one with the table and the yellow lines across it?
Let's leave the yellow lines for now. Just go with the pure blue table to start with.
Okay, I don't
starts with Midwest,
right?
I
don't have the pure blue one. I'll just put up the yellow line one.
Ah, okay, yeah, it's fine.
Isn't it the one that has Midwest Meltdown on there? On the top?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. You have that one.
I think I erased it because I just kept one of them because this one is the same thing but with yellow lines.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
I'll explain the yellow. There we go. Hello.
There we go.
Right.
I hope people can see that, but I don't see any other way of getting this up on the screen.
Yeah, that's fine. So the yellow lines are essentially, we're going to be looking at North America tonight primarily, but just as an overview, this is all the events that I have logged so far in the data that we're going to be looking at.
Yeah.
The yellow lines are indicating which of those events, there being 10 out of the 36, are actually North American.
Ah, okay.
Capital City Bloodbath on there. Woohoo.
Yeah, Capital City's on there. We've got, for the people on the podcast, I guess, we've got Midwest Meltdown, Wargames Con, Capital City Bloodbath, Nova Open, Chaos GT, Michigan GT, Octacon, Dragonfall, SoCal Open, Du Bois GT. There's 36 events in total, so that's just the North American ones. Again, you can find it all on The Honest Wargamer as you're listening to this.
Yeah, so this goes from July down to December, so it's because that's about when you started, right, in summertime?
I started a little bit before this. I actually started recording the data fully once AOS 2 dropped. Midwest Meltdown, there was conjecture over it initially, I'll put out there. It was right on the cusp of the original FAQ that came out for Age of Sigmar 2. But the organizers of Midwest Meltdown were actually playtesters, and the FAQ they used eerily matched what was actually released, pretty much. With the exception of, I think, the spell portal change they left. So you could argue that Legions of Nagash did very well that event, which they did because of the spell portal. But it's neither here nor there. For me, it was AOS 2, and it was using 99% of the FAQ, so I included it.
So
Bobo's the one that's interesting, though. Just because I think, wasn't that where a lot of the stacking stuff was still being... That's where it kind of... There's a lot of crazy combos with the stacking, right? Like,
was that Bobo, you said?
I'm talking about Bobo, yeah.
Yeah, Bobo actually eliminated all stacking. It was...
Oh, they did?
Yeah, it was... it was post... Bobo was post FAQ, yeah. But prior to the FAQ, they'd actually come out as an event and said, we want to make this a player experience. So in our opinion, stacking is bad. So they kind of... It was in their player pack before the FAQ, and when the FAQ came out, it just basically corresponded to what they said, with the exception of Gavriel Shorehart. Oh. And as you'll see right there, the first place finish at Bobo was Stormcast Eternals. So read into that. Yeah.
So, Damian, what's your criteria for putting an event on this table, just for people?
Yeah, so I started with a much narrower criteria. I said to myself, I want at least 30-ish players. After some consideration and talking to people in the community, as long as it's 5 games at 2,000 points match play, or let me clarify, 5+ games, so some events will be 6 games, at 2,000 points match play, regardless of the amount of entrants, I will log it if you have the data, as long as 2 players do not play each other twice.
Okay, and also clarify for people where you get this data from.
So, mostly from the events themselves and the TOs. Big shout out to all TOs. I can't do this without participation from them. So, and just them running events let people actually go and play these great games, right? So you always got to shout out the TOs. The ones that I can't get a hold of the TOs are more obscure events. There are apps. I use Best Coast Pairings. Best Coast Pairings have actually been really good to me and provided data after the fact as well. And a lot of these events come from them just saying, here's some data, we like what you're doing. And the same with Tabletop Tournament Organizer, or TTTO. That is also an event app that you can use. Both of these apps are free, by the way. And they've also given me access to data and provided event information. So it's a big culmination. There are also a couple of events where I have crowdsourced information. I won't go into reasons why, but yeah, the Twitter community on those crowdsourcing projects was instrumental, basically giving me results from tournaments on an individual basis. So.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, it's awesome that we have this data. We have apps that can collect this data, and as people can see there, there's quite a number of events here, at least 5 rounds. Most of them have a decent number of players. Some are really big, so it's interesting. It's probably like 2/3 non-North American, and maybe about a third, or maybe slightly less than a third, is a North American.
Yeah, we can get more into the full breakdown. I think the next sheet probably is, at this point, we'd probably want to look at the percentage breakdown sorted.
Okay, which one is that?
That will look like a big spreadsheet with lots of numbers in it.
All right, big spreadsheet with lots of numbers. Big spreadsheet with lots of numbers.
Its title at the top will say overall breakdown.
Sorted by 5+ wins, is that right?
That's the one, yeah.
Okay. It's got the green and the yellow in it, Karen?
Green and yellow. Okay, I think it's this one. Overall breakdown sorted by 5+ wins.
There we go.
There we go.
So, this is the data. This was me taking... There's a workbook these sheets come from, but this was me taking all that information and trying to distill it into something that people could actually see and understand. I've put how I've sorted this at the top. You could sort it many ways. It just so happens Daughters of Cain are coming out on top in this particular sorting, because I've sorted it specifically by how many 5+ wins do they have. And then what's their match win percentage were the most two important criteria with this sorting method. The reason I wanted to jump to this one is you've got the number of events in there, and quite importantly, the number of matches recorded, which as it stands today is 7,555, which is quite a decent data set in those kind of terms.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So there's a lot on this table. You can see that Legion of Nagash is played a lot. It's the most popular faction for sure, double that of Daughters, but Daughters have the highest win percentage, almost 80%.
Yeah, I think one conclusive thing you can draw from all the data, and I think a really useful tool for people wanting to go to events and tournaments and they don't know what they're going to be playing or playing against. Those meta percentage numbers, they're pretty hard facts. So you've taken out a lot of arguments is, well, match win is dictated by how good a player is and what happened with the dice and what also happened with the realms. And that's totally true. With the meta percentage, that is who has turned up at that tournament and what they have used out of 34 events. So you can get a very good idea. If you're going to a tournament of 100 people, there should be around 5 Daughters of Cain players, around 12 Legions of Nagash, 11 Stormcast, so on and so forth. So that is a good tool to use with regards to playing the field, if that's what you're looking at doing.
So what do you think of this chart? Are you surprised by this chart, or is this what you would expect?
There are a couple surprises on here. I mean, for one, I thought that generic order might actually be a little bit more popular because there's not too much incentive to really play Darkling Covens or Dispossessed really compared to Grand Alliance order. So I thought that, from a tournament perspective, you'd see a lot more people just going towards the Grand Alliance as opposed to playing these very specific factions, or like these baby factions. So because 48 is actually kind of small. I mean, Order Draconis, I think that's the one that I think Bobo. That's the coming out party for that Order Draconis army. So as far as I know, yeah. So now that's a big thing now. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the Order Draconis was 2 people at Bodo, and that's where you get one of the 4 wins and one of the 5+ wins from.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you see, Order is only just over 3% of the meta, so there isn't a whole lot of mixed order, pure numbers turning up at tournaments currently.
It's there's one difference though. I mean, definitely you're drawing from, like I would say, like worldwide events, right? And so from a meta perspective, I mean, certainly unless you're getting to the really large events, you're drawing from a certain regional meta, let's say, right? So, for example, I was at the Boys, and if I were to compare the percentages here to what was at the Boys, I'd say, well, Stormcast Eternals definitely were strong in terms of percentage. I think they're at like 30-something%, but Khorne was almost equally well represented at the Boys, which is a little surprising compared to the percentages you see here, because you think you'd see a little bit less of that in almost the same number of Nighthaunt. I don't even think there was a Nighthaunt army there, and I don't think there was any Sylvaneth there, or there might have been one player, but still, it's pretty. So like, it's, even though like it's good for meta planning, in another way, it's like, well, global statistics aren't going to tell you what's going to show up at your regional tournament, right? Because that's the only other thing you have to kind of consider, I guess, right? So
yeah. So I guess, well, let's just look at the winners first. We do have some regional information as well. But if we jump, so that's the overall stats. That's the table that people will be looking at when they're quoting things like Daughters of Cain have a 77% win ratio, and Legions of Nagash is the most played faction. That's the table we're looking at right now. So so if we bring up the winners, what I like to call the winners circle.
Okay.
The winner's circle.
There we go. Try and make it as big as possible. There we go. All right.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. So again, this is worldwide right now. This is every podium at every tournament that I've found so far. So there's probably more tournaments out there, but most of the major ones are covered here. And again, that's when this is independent of the one we just looked at. Yet when you look at who is at the top, Daughters of Cain, Legions of Nagash, Stormcast, it's exactly the same. So we were talking about trends earlier, and not reading too much into things. But the more you see this trend happening, then that's when you can start making, I wouldn't say conclusive judgments, but it gives you a good indication of what's actually going on in the tournament scenes right now.
Yeah, like if you take take the totals between the top 3, they've got more than all the other factions combined, and so that's top 3 finishes, right? Like, it's a big jump from the 3rd to the 4th, and the 4th. And there's a lot of little all these other factions tied for 4th. That includes Deepkin too, actually. So once you get to the 3rd line, everything's just 2, 1, and 0. So there's not a lot of separation there. Yeah, it's mostly in the first 3 lines.
Yeah, and when you look at Legions and Stormcast, one would usually assume, because there's such a large percentage of the overall meta, making up nearly 25% between the two of them, it's usually safe to say, well, they're going to be posting all the results, just purely on the fact there's so many armies out there. But then again, our friend Daughters of Cain, right at the top there, compared to their meta percentage, they're running 5%, as opposed to, let's say, Legions of Nagash's 12%. It's dirty math. You can't really do this, but if you times that 5% up and then applied that to what finishes they've had, you can kind of say, well, if more people played them, they might also have even higher numbers than they currently do. The other argument's also valid, though. You could say, well, if more people played them, they'd get more losses. But I think it's somewhere in between, to be honest, when looking at all this.
Well, I mean, I think you can separate out, you can use some of these numbers to separate out popularity from kind of good, like how good the army is. The best example that comes right to my mind is if we go over to 40K, Space Marines. You know, like at the beginning of 8th, probably these numbers would have shown that lots of people were playing Space Marines, and maybe some were winning. But as 8th has gone on, now good luck finding a competitive Space Marine player, and their win percentages are low. So I think these things will change over time, but you know, that's the fact that Daughters is not played as commonly, I don't think detracts necessarily from the fact that they're so good, right? So it's almost, yeah, I'm not a very good mathematician, but it's almost like the two things are kind of separate. It does show you trends, though, right? Like, so let's say you know, Stormcast get another book, which they tend to do every 6 months or so, and it's really good, and they're winning everything. So you're going to see both number of people playing and the number of wins go up. Whereas, let's say, oh, well, okay, so MoonClan gets their book next month, and it's really good, and lots of people have grots in their closet, so all their numbers are going to start shooting up, right? So,
yeah. And the larger picture would take, because we've got so many results right now, it's going to take a lot of wins and a lot of people playing to start pushing some of these armies up. The table we're looking at right now regarding who's hitting first place, second place, third place, MoonClan get a couple of wins in that first place or second place column, and all of a sudden they're going to be in the top 5, right?
Yeah, because like we said at the beginning, it's like there's one win separating, you know, most of these factions, you know.
Yeah, isn't it the kind of the classic example, the opposite example of, say, the Daughters of Cain, which are, you know, not that many people play, but then they seem to do very well, is Iron Jaws. Like, Iron Jaws is kind of considered you know, it's very kind of beginner friendly, and so therefore it has like a lot of participation. But they're not necessarily coming through filtering in the results, either because maybe the players themselves are not so well, the army itself is maybe not the strongest, as well as maybe the player base is also not as experienced, right? So I don't know, would that be fair to say like that?
Yeah, Iron Jaws, it's hard. I always try and take out the player quantitative when looking at things. It is a part of the results. You can't deny that. But the more results you get, player skill should balance out over time, if that makes sense. Right. So, the thing is, Iron Jaws is quite a represented faction. It's pretty much the same representation as Daughters of Cain. So you could argue that, well, maybe new players are playing Iron Jaws, but I think we're starting to get enough data to show that, well, we know good players are playing Iron Jaws, but they're still not hitting 5+ wins. You're always going to have that, you know, okay, this guy does 2 wins, this girl does 1 win, this other girl does 3 wins, but there should also be a few 5 wins in there. Iron Jaws haven't posted a single 5+ win yet in all their tournaments, and they're sitting with, you know, a 38% match win percentage. So you could argue in there, well, that's the new player factor as well. But then you look at something like Stormcast Eternals, which I think should have the most new players based on in the starter box, easiest faction to get into, arguably most pushed faction by the company, possibly, and they're pretty much the perfect bell curve when you look at this, in that they've got a big player base, they've got a number of 5 wins, but they've also got a number of 0 wins. Their match win percentage is pretty close to 50%. And that to me is, they may not be balanced internally as a faction. We all know that there might be issues with units, but as a faction within the game, they seem to be what you want as far as balance is concerned.
Yeah, like I guess the holy grail would be everybody would be on 50%.
Yeah, and you're always going to have a best army. I think the grail for balance is everybody being within, let's say, 3 to 4% of each other, rather than this huge swing of, well, the best army's posting 76, 77% wins, and the worst army's posting 20, 30% wins. That is an indicator of unbalance.
Mm-hmm. I'm only going to disagree with you on one thing, Damian. Everything you just said. You gave your example of this girl playing and getting 2 wins, and this guy and this girl. I'm like, what tournament has more than one girl, if any? I mean, that the boys had 55 people, 0 girls. That's representative, I think. We just got to keep things realistic.
Yeah. Okay, I concede that point.
Yeah, good point.
Thank
Good
you.
point.
Thank
Good point. glad we invited you along to this.
Just making sure. Sure.
The stats need more girls. Come on, girls. We know you're out there.
Seriously.
Come to some events.
All right.
So, so that's Winner's Circle. So we did touch on regional stuff. So I think if we want to move into, I think it's called Regional Breakdown, if you've got that.
Yeah, I got that. There it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so there we go.
Oh, sorry, it's shrunk. Hang on.
Yeah, it's a bit cough. We're missing Australia. I mean, I know we're on the other side of the world, but still got to have the Aussies in there.
Okay, I think that's most of them. We're just missing the quote unquote loser factions at the bottom.
Oh no.
Whoa.
Yeah, you want to move it up a bit. There you go. Oh, yeah, you've got them all there, I think.
We got Legions of Asgore, so that's fine. We're covered.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, here's a regional. So this comes back to Wee's point regarding, well, I go to a US or Canadian tournament and it's different results. So now this isn't. You're going to have regions within a region. The US is so huge, and you got Canada, so huge. The boys did have a lot of corn, and that might not be indicative of the overall meta, but this is 10 events. We've got 2,055 matches if looking at North America specifically, and that's your breakdown there. So, again, if you want to look at meta percentage, now, because of the formatting of the table, this means nothing to podcasters, but the formatting of the table, I had to leave the faction separated from the numbers. So what I've done here is highlighted the best and second best in each respective category there, which is what those yellow and green marks are for those following on at home.
Yeah, what's really interesting here is Nurgle.
Yeah.
So Nurgle is done pretty well, along with Legions of Nagash in North America, but it's like non-existent in UK and Europe. It's not non-existent, but it's not doing half as well.
Right. Yeah. So this is a bit of behind-the-scenes things, and we're actually working, and I've been working with Robert the Honest Wargamer. Hopefully this data will be in a more user-friendly form at some point. So we are working on that, but there's only so much you can show, without getting lost in tables and tables of things. Yeah. Unfortunately, I get to see all that, so you're just gonna have to trust some of my statements here. That they are all true. The Maggot King actually started the season overall quite well. And then as Daughters of Cain started coming onto the scene, more so in the UK, Maggot King actually started losing a lot more. And if you look at this from the beginning of the season to where we are now, Maggot King have been slowly moving down that chart. And looking at, we've been doing some work with match win percentages within factions. So that's if X faction plays Y faction, who's more likely to win. and we'll get that released as soon as it's ready. But in essence, Maggotkin have had horrible matchups against Daughters of Cain and, to a lesser degree, Legions of Nagash. So what you can draw from that is there's a ton of Legions Nagash out there. Maggotkin are going to lose to them a lot. There's not a ton of Daughters of Cain, but they are at the top tables. So Maggotkin might win 2 or 3, hit a Daughters of Cain player and start losing. Now in the US, there's not that many Daughters of Cain. With respect to an overall meta, but they're also not doing as well. So you put those two assertions together, and what you're finding is maybe Maggotkin are actually doing better, and more people are taking them because they're doing better in the US because there's less daughters preying on them.
Well, the daughters are still third in terms of top tens. What's interesting, if you look at the meta percentage in North America, you got Legions of Nagash, you've got Stormcast, but then you have Maggotkin, and then you have Blades of Khorne, and then you have Destruction close behind that.
Oh, right, yeah, the meta itself. Yeah, it's quite different than the rest. And that's that might answer some of Wee's questions as far as, well, I went to a tournament, there's a ton of Blades of Khorne, why are they only 5-6%? Well, as you can see there in the US and North America, you're an 8.5%, so they're actually pretty well represented there.
Yeah. I mean, it would jive with the real life experience, right? So I think that it's not Destruction though, Darren. I think you're talking about Nighthaunt being one of the top factions, right? Like, I think Destruction's only 1.5% of the North American meta. Am I reading that right?
Ironjaw's 7.8%.
Oh, Ironjaws themselves, yeah. This Destruction is a...
Sorry, that's Destruction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right now?
Yeah. Destruction, as it's listed here, is referring to mixed destruction, which is only 1.5%. But yeah, Destruction as a whole, if you was to take it as a faction within North America, a little bit of quick and dirty here, you're probably looking around 15% of the overall meta. Whereas if you compare that to the UK, you're on maybe 10-11% of the meta. So yeah, there's a marked increase in Destruction as a whole between the US and the UK, and even Australia. Australia's even less Destruction, probably closer to 7 or 8% there.
So here's a weird question. So obviously, what people play will be influenced by when the books come out, how good the models are, and how good that faction is perceived to be, and maybe a little bit based on actual performance eventually, but definitely not within 6 months of the book coming out. What do you think, like, there's cultural reasons why certain factions are more prominent in Europe than North, like, at the very core of meta, is there a cultural thing? Like, I guess it's impossible to get a sense of that just based on these numbers. But, like, you get this gut feeling that maybe the British just don't like X and North Americans like more of Y, or...
Yeah, and you throw the Australia, I've called it the Australasia because we've got some Japanese, New Zealand results in there as well. Yeah, there are distinct trends between all of them. I mean, if you look at all three regions, Stormcast and Legions of Nagash are always the top.
Yeah.
The UK and Europe, Legions are the most played, Stormcast second most played. You've got that happening. You've got the reverse of that happening in the US and Canada. So mainly Stormcast, followed by Legions. And then the same in Australia, mainly Stormcast, followed by Legions. I don't know. Maybe the US and North America are just more aggressive. They like to put those... they like...
Make America great again.
Yeah, that's it. It's MAGA all the way, right? You want to put those Blades of Khorne down, you want to put those Ironjaws down, you want to run to the middle, you want to hit your opponent. So, is there anything in that? I don't know. I think what you can say is with Stormcast and Legions being top in all, You've got a starter set representing, I know it's Nighthaunt, but you've also got Legion's models, compatible models in there. 2018 was teed up by Games Workshop to be the year of death. A lot of people got back, including myself, got back into Warhammer this year. I jumped on Legions because it was the newest book at the time, back in February, March. And Stormcaster, the poster boy. So I think that's what's driving those two. If you look at further down, you've got the Blades of Khorne versus Iron Jaws, and then Maggotkin in the US. You look at the UK, you've got the Daughters of Cain, and then you've basically got Blades of Khorne and Sylvaneth. I think Sylvaneth's the big one, really, looking at the US versus Australia and the UK. Sylvaneth being 6% of the 6.5% of the UK meta versus 4 in the US and Canada, and what have we got here? Yeah. Oh, I guess 6.6 in Australia as well. So we play them a lot in Australia. So I guess I guess the US and Canada just don't like painting all them trees.
Yeah, so I'll just go to the chat. Some interesting points are being raised in the chat, and get your thoughts on this. So about this topic. So Sir Flukeslot pointed out that in England they're meta chasing, but in Australia they tend not to do that. What do you guys think of that sort of thing? Like, is that cultural, or like what makes a certain continent want to chase meta more than others? Is it just because it was more popular in the UK, or
what do you think? You've probably got more experience from the North American side of things, at least.
There's definitely I guess a certain core of meta chasers. I mean, I think I've seen that more in kind of the 40k realm, as opposed to the Age of Sigmar, but I think there's bigger forces than that than meta chase, like kind of trying to chase. You're not necessarily trying to meta chase. You're just trying to kind of find your own interesting combinations and things like that. So I don't know if the Age of Sigmar has a kind of same kind of culture behind building lists. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Yeah.
Is it because maybe we have less tournaments, so there's less meta chasing?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if you're there, it's a mentality thing. I mean, there's a very different attitude that you find. So I would point to, like, so I was at the Boys, and it was very well attended, and people there, they weren't taking soft lists, right? They're there to win it. But I think that the general kind of tone and the attitude of the event is very positive and very supportive and very friendly. Even though they are trying to like do their best with their best lists, even with the guys that were taking Cascaders, they were still trying to win, even with Cascaders. Yeah. Who would have thought?
Yeah. The other point that was brought up is that it may actually be cheaper in the UK. Certain factions are obviously more expensive than others, and maybe that's why there's not so many Daughters players. But I think relatively, if you take inflationary rates and exchange rates and all that sort of thing, and relative currency powers, that maybe it is slightly cheaper to buy Games Workshop in the UK. I don't know if that
tell that to the Australians, man. The Australians are feeling the worst.
Yeah.
They're not happy with that.
Yeah, Australia is great. I mean, Canada is great. We've got US in here. US are actually reasonable pricing. Canada's a little out of whack. We're paying, I believe, $70 right now for a box of 10 Witch Elves.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're looking at $210 for a standard unit.
Yeah,
that's something I think that's bigger than all of this. Is really the barrier to building a whole 2,000-point army. It's how much stuff it takes, and building and painting the thing too, right? Like, it's a Daughters of Cain army. It takes a long time to paint if you're going to paint it to any sort of good standard. Get all the details down. Even if you're not the greatest painter, still just takes a long time to get all those details in, right? Yeah. Like, it's just they're very beautiful models and highly detailed, and just takes a long time. So it makes it hard to meta chase.
Something I hear a lot about the stats and DOK being the best is because they're the best, it feeds into them being the best faction makes people want to play them more, the meta chasers,
Right.
which gives them better stats. But you just brought up one of my key points, is those models are very expensive, they're very difficult to paint, and they're more of a hobbyist's army. And I'm not denying there are a lot of very good players who are great at hobby as well. Ben Saba, hashtag so hot right now.
Yeah.
So big shout out there to him. So you have got players that are the Renaissance guy that can do it all, but the meta chasers are usually, okay, I'll grab this army, I'll spray it, and I'll put it on the board. You can't really do that with a Daughters of Cain army. And why would you want to invest, $1,000 into an army you're just going to spray paint and put on the table to win a couple of boxes of models at tournaments, right? So I think there are a lot of good hobbyists playing Daughters of Cain and doing well with them, whereas there are also a number of good hobbyists playing Iron Jaws that not doing so well.
Yeah, and it's also the same on the other direction, right? I mean, Nighthaunt and Stormcast, as nice as those models are, I mean, you could probably do a pretty good job without investing nearly the same amount of time and money in building up a force, right? So, I mean, not to disrespect Stormcast players or Nighthaunt players, but it could look decent, right, without anywhere near the same time investment, right?
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, so should we move to the next one?
So I want to talk about this while we're moving to the next one, Damian. One thing that I think you can look at, I think, is a funny line, because we're talking about kind of the differences between the UK, Australia, and the North American scene. Clan Skyer. That's an interesting line. North America's overrepresented on Clan Skyer, and there's only really one way to build that list competitively, in my opinion, which is ultra aggressive, alpha striking, Goutfire Scorch type of a billion mortar wounds right off the jump.
Yeah,
and it's maybe that's the one that's more indicative of kind of any sort of cultural differences. Like, I just want to take this army and wipe it off the table, whatever it is.
that's yeah. Doesn't matter about the mission, right? It's just kill all the guys.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So, a little off topic here, but did you play much during the Caradron Overlords peak where they were actually good?
I did, but I think they didn't get a lot of people that picked up the army. I don't think, like, not locally in Toronto anyhow. So
Right.
there weren't a lot of people that were fielding that army. I was playing, but I think that's another case of the cost being a little bit prohibitive.
Right.
And I do know some guys that do play it, but they when it was good, it was really good. I mean, that was an excellent army at the time, right?
Yeah, because that's the classic. I'm gonna put my guys down and remove you turn one, right?
Yeah,
or it used to be at least.
Shout out.
I played.
Shout out to Nick at Capital City, who scored a total of, I believe it was 2 points in 6 rounds with Caradron.
That was
Oh my
after the
gosh.
nerf, though, right? That was
yeah.
was new AOS 2. Yeah, poor Nick.
Man, I played
Caradron have fallen.
I played against a Caradron Overlord player last LVO in 2018, and he did an excellent job of just blowing up all my rats. But the one thing is that it's an objective game, so I was able to just move on to the objectives, capture them all up, and because he just went in with a big ship full of an ironclad full of dudes. It's like, okay, well, you're in this corner blowing up stuff, but I'm getting all the points, and you can't table me because, well, you can table me, but it's not going to mean anything because I've got 10 plus points in the pocket, and you have 2 turns to catch up, right? So that was always even a challenge too back then for the Cards and Overlords player.
Yeah.
Alright, so I've pulled up this table here, which I'll just put back on the screen now. And this is kind of faction breakdown and percent of meta. The blue line is UK and Europe, red is US and Canada, and green is Australasia.
Australasia, yeah. So this is just visually representing what we was just looking at in those tables with regards to solely the meta. So you can see right there's some clear trends in certain countries.
Yeah. But
US and Canada.
Stormcast Legions, big pop-ups there.
Yeah, huge. US and Canada, you look at Sylvaneth right away, and they're in they're kind of they're in the middle of the two towers there. The two towers being the UK and Australasia, playing Sylvaneth a lot. But then you jump to Blades of Khorne. There's a massive red line there with the US and Canada representing them. Magickin and Nurgle again, huge representation. And look at Ironjaws, they're like almost double of the UK representation in the US and Canada for Ironjaws.
I think that's literally just Barney and Jason.
Going to every event.
Yeah. And Night Hunt too. Night Hunt over in Australasia, super popular. Okay. Cool.
There's a comment in chat here. They're asking how Legions of Asgore players, there's more in Australasia than there is in the UK. And I think they're referring to cost. So just a little quip here. Before the Forge World, I'll use the word, before the Forge World debacle with all the costs changing.
That's a fair
and
word.
and the fallout from that, it was actually cheaper to buy Forge World in Australia because of the way the pound was converting than it was to go into Games Workshop and buy plastic off of the shelves. That included shipping to your door.
Get out of here.
So in question, to answer Flukes' question, I think those people had Legions of Asgore armies because they were cheaper than buying Games Workshop armies at the time.
Interesting. Maybe that's why they did the debacle to cut that loophole.
That was it. All the Australians were buying up all the Forge World armies.
Damn, Australians messed us.
Yeah, screwed us Canadians over, right?
Yeah, man. Please. All right, cool. Anything else to talk about on this chart? It's kind of just a visual representation of some of the previous data we saw.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not really US and Canada centric, but I always found it interesting that Nighthaunt are huge in Australia. And again, that might be to do with cost. It's a relatively cheap army if you buy Soul Wars boxes. So, yeah.
And if you're good with an airbrush, it's fairly quick to get on the table, too. So,
there you go, yeah, quick and easy.
Yeah. All right, so this next table now, I think this is our final graph here. This is top threes. Top three finishes. Again, red is US, Canada, blue is UK, Europe, and green is Australia. And it's just a stacked bar graph here.
Yeah. Yeah, again, trends are there. You've got top threes now. Legions of Nagash leading the way, closely followed by Daughters of Cain. Then you're jumping down to things like Stormcast, Sylvaneth. Looking at the US and Canada specifically, Legions of Nagash have far and away the most top threes. Daughters of Cain are in there, but they're being beat out by the likes of Magickin, Blades of Khorne, and Stormcast. And Flesh Eater Courts. Oh, big shout out to Flesh Eater Courts.
Bill Sousa.
No top threes. Bill Sousa and Alan, and I'm going to murder his last name, Baramovich.
Yeah.
There we go. It's like the Sith Lord and his apprentice, right? He's Bill's created a monster and he's passed it on to his protege there. So, so Flesh Eater Courts, yeah, amazing. 2 actual wins from Bill and Alan there. I believe Alan won the boys, right? But that was Blades of Khorne.
But it was a Council of Blood with Eve the Exalted, Greater Demon of the Bloodthirster. right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So just a little thing there as well. And that's the fun side of the stats for me. You look at some of these, and especially looking at top threes, yeah, they're not going to affect the major table, but I'd love to see someone go out there with Free Peoples, Wanderers. Come on, where are all the dispossessed players, right? Like, go to a tournament, get your army, put it on round bases if it's still on squares. All those dispossessed players, I know your armies are still on squares. Go to tournaments and they're dwarves. It's in their nature, right? My dwarves are still on squares.
Well,
you're in the book now. You're in the book of grudges right now for that comment.
yeah, I know. My own are still on squares. That's what I play dwarves in Warhammer Fantasy, so I'm making fun of myself there as much as everyone else. But I guess what I'm saying is if you're looking at these stats and going, oh, look at legions, look at daughters, go out and break the meta. Take something off the wall. I think Wee's running Pestilence, like 200 clan rats or something crazy, right?
It's the list on the Honest Wargamers, Drown 'em in Monk Blood. Check it out.
Yeah. Excellent. So yeah, go out and put your name up there. Be the Bill Sousa of Beastclaw Raiders or Order Serpentis or Chaos.
Yeah. So shout out to the Australasia players who playing Fire Slayers, Kharadron Overlords, and hosts of Slaanesh representing with top 3 wins.
Yep. The one Kharadron top 3 was the gentleman that won the first and only so far AOS Japanese tournament.
Nice.
And he took it down with Kharadron Overlords.
Very nice.
Very nice.
And those are the stories that these stats help as well, right? We're not going to be able to share those stories if we don't have things like this. So.
Yeah. There we go. Fire Slayers in the house. Top 3 finish.
Well, it's always kind of this joke of hobby stores. It's this army, and it's kind of, there's always a big theory hammer discussion, in 5 rounds, this is the best army, blah blah blah. This army is so weak, and it's good. It's always nice to have a data set at least to look at, and that these are kind of facts that are incontrovertible, right? That they are what they are. I mean, there's always context around that, but at least there's something to discuss, right? And so, there's something to bring to the discussion besides just how people feel about a certain list, right?
Another little story. The Crim Bobo happened recently, and there was a fellow, and I forget his name. I'm sorry. If you're out there, you know who you are. You took Darkling Covens, and Darkling Covens had a horrible win percentage. He still took them, and he was loving it because he could look at that win percentage and say, "I only need to win 2 games out of 5, and I'm doing amazing, right? I'm only supposed to win 1 game out of 5, but I'm going to come and I'm going." And he gets his 2 wins and he's happy. So it puts into context and it takes away that feel bad when you spend all that time building an army. You've put all that investment into it, money, time, effort. You get to the table and someone drops down their Daughters of Cain on you and wipes you off in 2 turns. And you're like, well, what just happened? Am I a horrible player? This helps you give some kind of context to, well, no, you're using Iron Jaws, that's what happened. Wow, you went 3 games at a tournament with Iron Jaws, that's amazing, round of applause, right? Whereas a lot of people will come away from that and go, oh, I only went 3 games at a tournament. But in reality, it's, I went 3 games at a tournament. Similar to yourself, with Pestilence, right? Anything above 2 wins and you're beating you as a player are doing better than what your army should be doing.
I mean, I do like to say that I am the best Pestilence player in Canada for the ITC.
Yeah, there you go.
It's technically true. I mean, it's also John, friend of the show, and one of the CanHammer guys, John Green, he brought Gutbusters to the event. He did fantastic. And it's not like he went, 4-1 or anything, but for Gutbusters, it's like, wow, that's like a head turner. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
So it definitely is a kind of a context setter, right? It's saying, okay, well, 3-2, and the boys with the Gutbusters, very respectable. You should be pretty happy with that, right? So,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, totally agree.
anything else to say about these stats before we move on to some questions?
I often get asked by TOs, and all TOs out there listening to this, or if you know someone that's a TO, they're running a 2-day, 5-game tournament, 5+ game tournament, regardless of size, please get in touch. Get in touch via The Honest Wargamer. I'm on Twitter. Get in touch directly. Get in touch with CanHammer, and let's get your events represented. I also think it's good to showcase these events and let people see that they're out there as well. So it's more than just putting numbers into a spreadsheet for me. It's about community building as well, and just seeing what's out there and who's doing what. And the formats I like, obviously if you're using an app, that's fantastic. That's the easiest thing. If you want to do it your own way, that's great. Number of wins, faction are the two most important things regarding the stats that I record. Going further, as I mentioned earlier, we have started recording faction matchup percentages. So if you've kept a spreadsheet and you happen to have data for each round, X played Y, Y played Z, just send it all across. I'll do all the work, I'll do all the number crunching, and I'll make it relevant as far as the stats are concerned. So.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that you're doing this, and these numbers are just very interesting to talk about. I mean, we've talked for an hour and a half about, statistics of Sigmar, so it's super interesting to talk about and to have these numbers. So we got to thank you for putting in all that effort. I don't even know how to make an Excel spreadsheet, so I can never do this. So.
Yeah. I was lucky. I do it for work, so. I finished my Excel spreadsheet for work. Let's work on this other Excel spreadsheet for fun, right?
My wife makes fun of me sometimes how bad I am at Excel. So
I would and I've said this publicly as well. I would love if Games Workshop themselves as a company would take this up. I'm just one guy. I've got help from the community, but I'm doing this off my own back. But imagine what could be done. It is always my thought, and just pick it up. You've started that interaction with the community. You're obviously logging playtesting, and this would help in that playtesting effort. I feel, just to give context to it. So, and I think more people would be invested in it as well if. That it had the company seal of approval. But yeah, until they want to pick up the torch, myself and anyone else that wants to get involved and help me, we'll keep carrying the torch. I do want to mention it's not come live yet. Big shout out to his handle is Prof T, as in PROF, as in Professor T. He's been doing some amazing work with me. He's actually a bona fide Oxford University professor. He works with statistics and analytics. Whoa. And there's some amazing stuff coming. Let's just when we tell you that this faction can do this and that faction can do that, we're talking about analyzing how good players are. You as a player, we can track your results, put them into his little machine he's made, and say you can get better if you do X, or you can be better if you do Y. It's the future. It's kind of scary, It's like, are we creating a cybernet here for AOS? Models are going to come and take over the world. No, but he's been doing a lot of work with me, and it's been unsung so far. So I did want to give a shout out to him if he's out there listening. And his work and efforts will be on display pretty soon, hopefully. So,
well, you know what people can do to bring this kind of work to GW's attention, of course, is to nominate people for the community thing, the star.
No. Yeah, don't nominate me. If you want to nominate,
you get your name at Warhammer World and everything.
Yeah, I would love it if. And I've also been asked, do you have a Patreon? Do you have donations? Send that all to the Honest Wargamer. I do this as a hobby. He is taking this up as a living. Rob is doing amazing work. He's providing websites for us. He's providing content for us. It's all free. It's all community driven. So if anyone's a hero, I have to shout out, Rob and the whole of the Honest Wargaming team, to be honest. And send them your Patreon money that you're going to send me. Send them your support. Send them your tournament results. And I wouldn't have this information out in the public if it wasn't for them either. So yeah.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, Rob's doing a great job. All right, I'm going to ask some questions. Earlier on in the show, I just deferred it to now. We had a watcher called Triple Diamonds. And since we got Hui here, it's a perfect question. He's just getting back into AOS. He was a fantasy player. He's got Skaven and Ogres. Any recommendations? And probably can't play those two together, I don't think.
Cannot.
But
nope, cannot.
Since we have the world's best Skaven player.
Whoa! That is not what I'm saying. Skaven Pestilence in Canada, but I gotta qualify it a lot. So I mean, if he's playing Skaven, if a lot of the old models are still very viable. So clan rats are, I mean, secretly they're fantastic. Most people don't realize how good they are because they can't be held down really from combat. They can always just retreat, move away, and get on stuff, and they're very cheap. But I would say that you're gonna have to open up if you're an old fantasy player and you played Skaven, you might be thinking, okay, I have to kind of stick to a specific clan or whatever. But unless you're playing Pestilence or Scryer, there's really no incentive to do that. You can just play Grand Alliance, Chaos, mix in some other stuff, or mix it across all the other Skaven that you do have. So Graciers are great. Vermin Lord Deceivers are fantastic. Night Riders, small unit Night Riders might be useful. And, look into all the Vermin Lords too. I mean, I think they all have very interesting effects. And, but, I mean, I think that, if you're going to play Age of Sigmar, you're going to support the game. Times you can use it to kind of as a way to get back into it, but like, let's support the game by putting up armies and like painting and playing and getting new stuff in as well, right? So it's great. I'd love to see more Skaven players, but let's support AOS the way that 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy was not, right? So that's one of my messages I always bring up is that we got to remember what brought us to this point, right? So
cool. Question for you, Damian: how many factions have no data?
Oh. Good job, I got a spreadsheet in front of me, isn't it?
One you prepared earlier.
Give me a second. Okay.
And what's the lowest win rate faction?
Right.
That's a good question.
Firebellies.
Firebellies. No one's playing Firebellies.
Firebellies aren't a faction. We can't. I don't think we can use them, right? Like, come on.
Master Clan.
Possibly. Right. Lowest win percentage looks to be, just double checking, Slaves to Darkness. Massive 20%. They've only had three recorded. They've only had 3 instances recorded, but they've had a 0 win, a 1 win, and a 2 win. So
okay,
that answers that. As far as factions with 0 data, let's have a look. I can pull this up a second.
Oh, we have a special guest.
Yeah, who's that?
Just for Hui.
Oh, who's that?
Oh,
is that Reggie?
It's Reggie, yeah.
Yes, yes. No. Sad.
There we go. My views just shot up like 3,000%.
Oh, buddy. That's what you put up on YouTube. You got to put the picture of Reggie on. Cat videos always do well. See? There we go. Beautiful.
Okay. Do we have any 0s? Okay, guys, there are no 0s. I know that there are some minor factions like the Postmen. What are they called?
The Postman?
Postman.
The Postman faction. Everyone knows the Postman faction.
Oh my
Kevin
goodness.
Costner. They ride eagles and they have shadow
Swift Hawk
warriors.
agents?
There you go. There are no Swift Hawk agents.
Oh, no.
There are no Swift Hawk agents recorded in any tournament so far.
Never even heard of that.
It's a real thing. There's a really good player actually over in the UK. Shout out to Darren Watson. And he's actually painting up a Swift Hawk agents as we speak.
Oh.
Just to put into context how good of a player he is in the UK Masters. He's done very well this season. So if he sees there's something in there, and he's often known for playing Filth, so who knows? Maybe Swift Hawk agents are the new Filth, or maybe he's falling as well. I guess we'll see.
One of the American kind of list gurus, I'd say, is Tom Lyons. I don't know if you know him, Thomas Lyons from Warhammer Weekly.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Warhammer Weekly. Yeah.
And he always talks about Swift Hawk agents basically whenever he can. But it's like, when are you going to build a list then? You know, like,
yeah.
There's some sort of secret sauce that he sees that I'm not quite sure about.
AOS Coach just wants to compliment you, LLV, on your work and for all your help in Australia with the Masters. And so I have a question for you, Hui. Speaking of Masters, do you think we got enough to do some kind of Masters in Canada?
Probably not. I mean, well, we are starting up a bit of a circuit in Southern Ontario where the tournament event organizers are going to be coordinating more. So we have Lords of War, we have Sword and Brush, we have War Masters team tournaments, and CanHammer team tournaments, and Age of Sigmar. So all these kind of more local groups are going to be trying to organize a circuit, I'd say. That's all still kind of very much in the pre-planning phase, but we have to. I think our focus is to be, let's get this all running up and smooth and growing the community as a whole, and then we'll see about that.
Yeah, but we could
probably needs.
We could host the Masters at Capital City or something every year,
Or or it could be part of the circuit as well. I mean, So yeah.
All right.
But
yeah. Sorry.
No, I just think that it does kind of need something like that. That's kind of the fun of LVO for me, anyways. Is that it's kind of a culmination of the season, right? That it's you've played the year, you had your points logged, and it's like this is the penultimate event or the culmination of the season, right? So it's kind of fun to be a part of that, right? So having something like that more locally would be great.
Yeah. Tristan Gray asked you, LV, if you have a store. What's your local store?
I do. I don't. There are a couple, and I don't play there often as I should. There's obviously the local Games Workshop Chinook, here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and that's in the big Chinook Mall. And we've also got a large FLG called the Sentry Box, which is it's kind of mind blowing how big that place is. But we play there sometimes as well, but. I don't play. Yeah, I'm cracking on with the painting right now on the old Stormcast. So my plan is to get that hopefully finished by around January, and then dive into some heavy play testing before Bobo.
You have a great gaming group in Alberta. I think they're called Ultimate Gamers. Is that right?
Ultimate Gamers. I used to play with them back in the fantasy days. They were really big Warhammer Fantasy, and then they kind of broke up a little bit around AOS. But as I said, I'm only just getting back in as around March time this year. So they do hold tournaments, but they're usually in the winter. So I missed it this time around, and Bobo will be before then. So
because I just met up with Jeff Painter and stuff like that at LVO. So
really cool
guys.
Yeah, sounds good.
So Tristan's asking where to find info on Canadian events, and unfortunately, this is something I've been throwing around in my head to make a event calendar for Ontario anyway to start with, and then maybe try and roll it out to cover the rest of the country. It's really sort of concentrations in Ontario, Quebec, and then out west. But so that would be something that would be interesting. I just don't have the time. But because I tell you what, when you're trying to plan an event, it becomes obvious to you because people they don't want events to overlap. and how many actually events there are and how few weekends there are to put events on. So there's a lot of events, and it's hard to know what's going on and where, and we're a big country, so you kind of need to plan. You can't just drive to Calgary for the weekend. You want to go to an event in Calgary, it's like a vacation. So and costs as much to fly to Japan as it does to fly to Calgary. So
I don't think people realize that how big Canada is sometimes. Just to put into context for the guys in the UK there, Darren and we are actually closer to the UK than I am to them.
And so the UK has a big advantage because you can hop in a car. 6 hours will take you across the country anywhere you want to go, and so that's why they probably have such a very tight meta, because everyone could go to every event. Whereas here, if you don't live Ontario, Quebec, or kind of further west, it's really hard to go to events. So that's something I'm trying. If people want to kind of collaborate on making a calendar or something, if some TOs out west want to collaborate, I'm certainly open to doing something like that. We could even host it, or we've got a decent following. For AOS, like I know John Green is starting up the AOS version of CanHammer Team Tournament, which is great. That's something that people have been asking us to do after the 40K version for the last couple of years. So he's running that, I think, in April, which is awesome.
June.
Okay, June. Yeah,
June.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know why April's in my head. And then, of course, we've got Capital City Bloodbath, which we hope to hit much bigger numbers this year. But that was already pretty big last year. And there's the Toronto guys, Age of Sigmar. There's a lot of they're running quite a bunch of AOS events too. So
they're great guys. Yeah,
I'd actually, apart from Capital City Bloodbath, the only Canadian event that is the only Canadian event in the stats I have. So any events happening in Canada, especially, we're in the Wild West where I am. There's few and far between, and people are so spread out here. The next closest city, just to put it in context to non-Canadians, is over 300 miles away from me. So, whereas Toronto's quite metropolitan, and you've got a lot of people on top of each other. So, yeah, if you any of those tournaments you mentioned, if they're running 2 days, 5-game plus 2,000 match play, please get them to get in touch or pass the details along. That would be fantastic for me. So
yeah, AOS coach had an interesting question. The website AOS Shorts, which of course is a great place for finding lists and things like that, do they have Canadian events? And I'm not sure that they do, actually. I don't remember seeing Capital City on there.
Yeah. Dan at AOS Shorts is again another shout out. A lot of shout outs tonight. He's been a great guy. He's also helped me behind the scenes get information, especially from a lot of those New Zealand events down in the middle of Middle Earth there. So he's been he's been feeding me the information from down there, and he's super open to helping the community as well. So I'm sure if you get hold of down at AOS Shorts, he'll get some. He'd love to get some Canadian events up there as well. So.
Yeah, I know we got some coverage by Rob at the Honest Wargamer, and our meta is a little bit different from what was typical at the time. But
yeah. And again, on the Honest Wargamer, that'd be great. They've started logging events as lists. So if you can get your lists to them, if you go on there right now, I think they've got all the New Zealand Masters and Australia Masters and things broken down into those lists. Once they've inputted the lists into that website, the players of said lists can actually take ownership of it and then go in and start writing their breakdowns and things. So again, information. The more information we all share, I think the better the community is overall. So
yeah. Okay. Well, that's it for our questions. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my guests, Huy at Huycon Wargaming. Thank you, Huy. And of course, Damian, aka the famous LLV.
Oh no,
from Middle Canada somewhere. I'm not really sure of my geography.
We're in the west. I'm in the west.
Calgary.
That's
I'm just
Calgary,
kidding.
man.
I know where Calgary is.
Thank you for having me on. It's been great, guys.
And thank you for all the stats and the work that you do on that. It's excellent, and we should all be supporting that. So nominate him for the community thing.
See, all this modesty only makes you a better candidate. I'm sorry, you can't be too modest.
Yeah, awesome. Before we go, just want to put an announcement out there. It's been on our Facebook page, but CanHammer Team Tournament 40K version is May 11th to 12th this year, and that's hopefully going to be way bigger this year. We had to move because of size, basically, and be a little bit more convenient to get all our terrain there as well. And we're hoping for big turnout this year. As usual, the signups is probably going to be around end of January time. You have to sign up with your whole team, 5-man teams, ETC format, and you have to pay for your whole team at once to actually get your spot. And last year sold out in 9 minutes, but this year we're hoping, because we're going to be bigger, that it won't sell out quite as fast. But you do have to be prepared, so be prepared. You got a month. And the Capital City Bloodbath is already confirmed for August 17th, 18th weekend. By popular demand, we probably bringing back the Friday. What exactly we're going to do with it or how the 3 days will work out, we haven't decided yet. But mark it on your calendars. That will be Capital City Bloodbath, August 17th, 18th weekend.
Are you guys still looking at trying to bring some honest coverage out to that event?
I am. I am working with Rob and his crew to make that a reality. Get Rob to come over and cast either 40K or AOS or both. At Capital City Bloodbath. That would be amazing. So we'll just see if we can make it happen. There's a couple of technical barriers we have to cross with our venue. But I really want to make that happen. I want him to come over to Canada, and I want to get our events out to the wider world. So I think it would be great if we can do that and make that happen.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. Question from Tristan. CCBB signups it won't be for a while, man. Don't worry. But that's the weekend. That day's not changing. So, yeah. No, that sign up will probably be like... It would definitely be after CanHammer Team. Yeah, we just can't handle dealing with two events at the same time. So, okay. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching and for listening on iTunes when this eventually goes up on iTunes. Thank you for everybody in the Twitch. Lots of chat going on tonight, which is great. I'm glad we started live streaming again the podcast because it's that live interaction is really cool. Thank you again to my guests, and we'll bid you guys good night.
Cheers, thanks.
Have a good night.